Jurassic period. During the Jurassic period and Cretaceous period, the dinosaurs evolved into various adaptive types, many of which reached colossal size. Tyrannosaurus rex, about 70 million years ago. Its long skull was equipped with powerful jaws in which were set sharp, doubly serrated teeth. Weighing more than 4 metric tons and averaging 19 feet in height, this creature was believed to be one of the largest predators who ever lived on our planet.
Oh my foot! Ah! Oh, whose idea was this? Oh God, there's glass and bones and it's all over the place. Oh, I don't know, maybe the Addams Family? Oh God, I'm gonna be in my trailer. Someone go get me some fruit snacks from Crafty. Well, it's been 20 years since I took to the rain-drenched streets of New York City. What simpler times they were. But here we are, 2 decades later. And what is there to be said about this movie? What is its ultimate impact and legacy, if it even has one? Poised to be one of the biggest blockbusters of 1998, Godzilla was the long-awaited American adaptation of the beloved and sometimes feared Japanese monster. Columbia TriStar had a lot riding on the movie, with a reported production budget of over $130 million and a legendary marketing campaign that lasted for over a year. But actually, this film was the second attempt to bring an American Godzilla to audiences. In the early 90s, producers Cary Woods and Rob Fried negotiated with Toho for the American rights to the Godzilla character, with plans for an original story for the film. A screenplay by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio was penned and approved. It was at this point that producer Chris Lee came to our old friend Roland Emmerich and offered the job to him. But Emmerich passed, expressing a total disinterest in the character and calling the old films weekend matinees that you saw as a kid, like Hercules films and the really bad Italian westerns. Eventually, John DuPont was set to direct. The plot dealt with a scientist seeking revenge on Godzilla for killing her husband, and Godzilla would have squared off with a new kaiju known as the Griffin in the film's climax in New York City. The creatures were designed, and Stan Winston Studios built maquettes of them. Obviously, in this version, Godzilla's appearance was much closer to the Toho version, and there were rumors of a 75-plus page memo from Toho to Woods and Fried outlining specifics about Godzilla's design, personality, and all the do's and don'ts. As the budget ballooned for this film, an agreement couldn't be reached between DuPont and the studio. DuPont didn't want to compromise his vision, and Sony refused to increase the budget, so DuPont went on to direct Twister instead, and he took most of the proposed cast for his Godzilla film with him. And here's where we get back to our all-time most favorite people in the world ever, 2 men who could do no harm no matter what they touched, the duo of filmmaking gods known as Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich. Famous for destroying everything from the White House, twice, to Los Angeles, to the Burj Hotel in Dubai, to Maria Pitillo's career, these were the custodians trusted with the fate of TriStar's blockbuster and the reintroduction of the world's most famous monster to a brand new audience.
I'm gonna flatten the place. Flatten it, I tell you, flatten it.
After turning down the project 4 times, they were eventually persuaded to come on board by producer Chris Lee. Hot off the success of Independence Day and wanting to follow it up with an even bigger and badder film, it seemed like a match made in heaven. I mean, Devlin and Emmerich had now cemented themselves as popcorn entertainment masters with fun, humor-filled films that still carried huge world-ending stakes and appealed to the worldwide audience. However, Emmerich was still hesitant to take on the project, fearing the daunting task of something he viewed as campy and trying to revamp it for modern audiences.
For me, it was always hard to kind of envision like a new Godzilla because I had so much like kind of burned in my mind, you know, like kind of the image of all the sequels of Godzilla, where basically you see like two monsters, you know, fighting, like Godzilla versus a new creature, and I kind of never quite kind of understood that.
However, the more he thought about it, Emmerich decided that it could be a fascinating concept to work out. To Emmerich, a movie in the 1950s no longer worked in the 90s. He uses the example of how War of the Worlds needed to be revamped in order to tell the kind of story for the new audience. They wouldn't buy it the old way. In his mind, Independence Day is the War of the Worlds for the 1990s. His thinking with Godzilla is rooting in trying to tell a story for a relevant audience. It wasn't some sort of selfish decision of his that, you know, his vision was going to be so radical and so different. The way he saw it, Toho has and would always have the classic Godzilla, while he and TriStar Pictures would have the new one. Emmerich, however, decided that he wanted to toss out Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio's draft of the screenplay. He had a different vision for the film in his head, in which he wanted to totally start from scratch and reintroduce only Godzilla to the world, without having another monster in the mix.
Both Dean and I kind of really said, that's the model. That's the model. We go back to Godzilla comes to a town.
We needed to start from the beginning and not have a movie where Godzilla is the savior of the world and battling other creatures, but rather to introduce the creature in very much the way the very first Godzilla movie was made.
One obstacle now remained: impressing the Toho brass with their vision for not just the new film, but for Godzilla himself. Enter Patrick Tatopoulos, the man responsible for the devilish looks and charm of yours truly. So why would they hire a French guy who grew up in Greece to redesign a Japanese monster for an American blockbuster? Well, as he was working as an artist on commercials, he saw pictures in a magazine from Something Wicked This Way Comes, and was inspired to start designing creatures of his own. His first major gig was designing a puppet for an episode of Star Trek, and then he went on to design the sets for Super Mario Bros. And Bram Stoker's Dracula. His first collaboration with Emmerich was on Stargate, and then went on to design the aliens for Independence Day. Obviously, Emmerich tasked him next with redesigning Godzilla.
My first reaction was, well, this thing is designed already, what do you want me to do? I mean, I don't think I can change it. And he said, well, listen, I want to make this creature quicker, more agile, faster. Go to work.
No doubt this was part of his vision to further distance this new character from the slow-moving and bulky classic Godzilla.
If you look at the old design, the creature is very heavy, big, heavy legs. So it's slow, massive. I couldn't use the old design and make him look like he runs 500 miles per hour.
Tatopoulos decided to draw from nature in his design.
I knew he didn't want me to take an iguana and blow it up to 250 feet tall. We don't want to do that. I still wanted the creature to have something special. It's very anthropomorphic, for example. You look at his torso, his arms, and it's very much human in aspect. There's no lizard looking that way. This mix of different things is typical to the tradition of dragons in Japan as well. It's like mixing cat elements with lizard with birds element together and creating a dragon.
But Tatopoulos wanted this creation to steer clear of evoking elements of dinosaurs, especially with Jurassic Park and now The Lost World out in theaters and in the public eye. Dragons became another key influence, and as an added touch, my wonderful beautiful chin here was directly inspired by Shere Khan from The Jungle Book. During the Cannes Film Festival and while promoting Independence Day, Emmerich was once again at a crossroads about Godzilla. He had heard that John DuPont had had trouble getting his changes to the creature approved by Toho. However, at the festival, Tatopoulos had a meeting with Emmerich in which he revealed his concept art for the new creature. Emmerich absolutely loved it, and immediately had Tatopoulos make a maquette of the sketch, his faith and vision in his new film restored by Tatopoulos' design. The duo quickly flew to Japan to have a meeting with Toho, armed with the maquette that they intended to unveil at the climax of the meeting. Emmerich pitched his whole vision of the film to Toho.
And then the time came to show the creature, so I unveiled the creature, and the first reaction was like, nothing. And no smile, nothing. They were kind of saying, And at that very moment, I realized that maybe I've changed the creature too much. Maybe we went too far. They're not gonna go for it.
The brass from Toho were speechless and asked for Emmerich and Tatopoulos to come back the next day for an answer. The boss asked a lot of intelligent questions, specifically why Emmerich wanted to change the monster so drastically. Emmerich's answer was simple. I have to reinvent it, he says, as we did with War of the Worlds. There is no reason for me to do it without making changes. And that was that. Toho agreed.
Much to our surprise, they really embraced it. In fact, one of the gentlemen from Toho said that if they had had the special effects technology that we have today, they might have altered the design of the original creature to be more like this one.
The film started its months-long shoot in Jersey City and then moved on to Manhattan, LA, and Hawaii, which tripled for Jamaica, Panama, and Tahiti. I can't even imagine the nightmare of trying to film in downtown New York City. Blockbuster film crews are not small by any means, and when Roland shots cover literal blocks of the city, it takes an equally sized army of film crew to pull off shots like this. Most of the interiors were done on stages, with variations of the destroyed Madison Square Garden taking up most of the stage space. When it came time to do the visual effects, they were done on a shot-by-shot, figure-it-out kind of basis. On Independence Day, Devlin and Emmerich wrote their VFX sequences in mind, but on this film, they just went out and shot it, wanting more camera movement and a more natural feeling to the film. A lot of the shots on Independence Day were locked down or had overly simple camera movements. Emmerich didn't want to do the same with this film. As the supervisors broke down how they'd handle every shot, it became apparent that CGI would work best to bring Emmerich's vision of a fast, swift Godzilla to life. Armed with the best computers the late 90s could dish out, the CGI team at Centropolis Effects set out on their huge task. Emmerich was confident in his company, knowing that they could deliver the goods. Motion capture was briefly flirted with to assist the performance of Godzilla and the babies, but Emmerich deemed it too stiff and favored the look of keyframe animation instead. Remember, back then, motion capture was extremely rudimentary and was mainly used only as a reference for the animators. Now, as advanced as late 90s CGI was, a lot of the shots still required the old-fashioned technique of large-scale miniatures. And, get this, a man in a suit! That's right! There's actually suitmation in this movie! Actor Carley was tasked with playing Godzilla in several scenes that utilized 1/24th scale miniature sets. Now, all of that came as a surprise to me, because I assumed that the entire movie had been done using CGI. The adult Godzilla suit was specifically used for any sequence in which the head needed to physically break through something. So, the scene where Godzilla comes up through the street in front of Matthew Broderick, the scene in the tunnels, and in the climax of the film when Godzilla comes out of Madison Square Garden, are all shots of the suit that ended up in the final movie. Now, Kurt didn't grow up playing with Godzilla toys, but he was familiar with the films. He recalled the time that when he was a young kid, he went and saw Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. Kurt said, and when I was watching that movie, and watching Godzilla walk through all the miniature sets, I said to myself that I'm going to do that one day. And then 25 years later, I am in a Godzilla suit on a miniature set, and I'm like, oh my gosh, here I am. Shooting scenes with the suit took a long time to set up and make sure that all the elements were properly dialed in. Kurt recalled that shooting the street scene took a while to pull off. We're dealing with the speed, the rate that I'm coming through the street. We're dealing with the frames per second that they were shooting, dealing with the right amount of debris, the right amount of denseness of the street itself. It took a few times to get it complete, Kurt said. One of the model makers also accidentally ended up putting his foot through the model street during a late Friday afternoon setup, and the scene had to be pushed to the following Monday. Now, of course, as with all Godzilla suit actors, Kurt said he did face some difficulty while performing in the suit. It wasn't because of the suit's construction, but it was mainly due to the unusual body position in which he needed to perform. Because, you're basically hunched over your legs with your arms tucked up like this, and the way the feet on Godzilla were constructed, he was basically standing on his toes. More sequences in the film initially had planned to use the suit as well, such as scenes of Godzilla escaping the helicopters and the climactic showdown on the Brooklyn Bridge. However, as Zilla touched on before, Emmerich ended up preferring the CGI creature in those sequences. He thought the keyframe animation was more realistic. Kurt also helped bring one of the baby Godzillas to life. For certain scenes in Madison Square Garden, him and the other suit actors playing the babies were actually bolted to the floor of the stage, so that way they could dedicate 100% of their energy to their performance without having to worry about literally falling over during a take. Ultimately, Kurt enjoyed the time he spent in the suit playing Godzilla. And I mean, who wouldn't?
Meanwhile, a giant 1/6 animatronic of the upper torso and head of Godzilla was also created for the close-ups.
A team of a half-dozen puppeteers used hydraulic controls to operate the giant beast's arms, torso, breathing movements, and even eyelids.
The larger scale was required for the level of destruction that the model would inflict. Shots like this from the fish market attack required small details to fall towards camera, so a larger model with more detail needed to be used. Shots like this use this animatronic as well. Fortunately, however, for fans of practical effects, a large majority of New York City was realized through the use of these 1/24th scale miniatures. This film, and along with, I'd say Independence Day and Armageddon too, are among the last giant blockbusters to have both models and CGI featured so heavily together. There's something just so satisfying about the way the models crack and break and blow up, and it's awesome. It's something that CGI can never replace. I wish more of the suit and the animatronic made it into the final movie instead of the digital creatures. I know that big movies are incredibly tough to make and that there are deadlines to meet and all, but falling back so heavily on CGI all the time just feels lazy.
Visual effects supervisor Andy Jones was selected by Emmerich to be Godzilla's primary animator, and Jones ended up animating over 50% of Godzilla's shots in the final movie. Like Tatopoulos, Jones drew mainly from reptiles and large cats when designing Godzilla's performance. When Godzilla's stalking, that's kind of how a big cat, like a tiger or a lion, would stalk their prey.
So as the film enters post-production, TriStar pulls out all the stops with a world-class marketing campaign that did exactly what it needed to do. Tease. The less the audience sees of the monster, the more interested they become in seeing the actual movie. Unfortunately, this is all defeated by the practice of selling toys and tacos, but never mind that.
I think I need a bigger box.
The infamous museum teaser debuted over a year before the movie was actually released, attached to screenings of Men in Black. The campaign emphasized the sheer size and power of Godzilla, with the tagline, "Size does matter." And that's really all you needed to see. The name is so recognizable that once audiences see it attached to the teaser trailers and posters and bus ads and Taco Bell cups, it just sells itself. The movie opened on Wednesday, May 20th, 1998. Yet despite all of this brilliant marketing and a prime Memorial Day release date, it only managed to gross $44 million in opening weekend, low even by 1998 standards. It struggled to get past $136 million domestic, A worldwide gross of $379 million isn't bad, but it was not the smash hit that TriStar was hoping for. In the aftermath of the release, Sony decides to not move forward on the proposed second film of their would-be trilogy. And thus, the lonely, rusted remains of my former self wasted away into oblivion on the Sony backlot. Instead, an animated series, Godzilla the series, was ordered and ran for 2 seasons on Fox Kids. Its spirit was closer to the heroic Godzilla of the late Showa era, and is usually held in higher esteem than the movie, but that's a whole other topic for more videos. So, what went wrong? I guess that's been on everyone's mind for the last 20 years, hasn't it? Well, the biggest problem with this movie? It's too safe. You can't blame the studio for it though, big budget blockbusters like this have to be safe. The studio wants to make sure they can make back their money, so they need something that can cater to the lowest common denominator of audience. Hence the hiring of Devlin and Emmerich. Their track record of safe but fun was consistent. Plus, they were now the most prominent disaster filmmakers in Hollywood after Independence Day. Why not give them Godzilla? Godzilla destroys stuff and they destroy stuff. Overall, I think this is also a problem that I think extends from a cultural difference of the way that the Japanese and Americans tell stories.
八百万の神でこれだってなんだって神様がいると思っちゃうわけですよ。
He is dirt. He's a douchebag, gutter slime, dog crap, puke chunks.
America and Japan are 2 totally different cultures, and therefore will tell similar stories in 2 totally different styles. We also seem to have the need to have everything explained to us in a movie. There's no faith in anything anymore. We can't believe in anything.
その辺のところがなんかちょっとあまりにも昔のそういう映画と比べてちょっと夢がなくなってきてるんじゃないかなっていうのは気がしないでもないんですけど。
To the Japanese, Godzilla was more than just a lizard. He meant something. He symbolized the truths and horrors of nuclear war.
I kind of never quite understood that.
Whereas to TriStar, Emmerich, and Devlin, the only thing he symbolized was the box office dollars that they were hoping to rake in from his name. He was just a big old lizard, looking for a place to squat his ass down and lay some big old eggs.
He was a neutral party. This is what happens when you turn this monster, this symbol of everything, into just an animal. Are we supposed to care for Godzilla? I mean, we're supposed to be scared of him, but not because he's evil or he's out to get us. He's just a scared animal running around. He's a threat, but he's not evil. Instead of coming ashore to wreak vengeance on Japan, this Godzilla just kind of comes ashore and becomes a minor inconvenience for everyone.
They made the $100 million mistake, as Terry Rossio puts it. Remember, him and Ted Elliott were the ones hired to write Godzilla initially? In his column, Rossio writes, Godzilla is the perfect case study. I'd argue we got the basic approach right. People wanted to be scared of Godzilla, but they also loved him, and you wanted to root for him. So you let Godzilla stomp into the film all scary-like, then bring on some other big monster for him to fight, so the audience gets to cheer and then let Godzilla kick ass, swing that big J-Lo tail around, and even if a few buildings get smashed in the brawl, hey, that's the price we pay for having the lovable lizard defending our Earth. You're scared, you're excited, Godzilla kicks ass, you cheer, and bring on the sequel. Devlin and Emmerich, I'd argue, screwed it up. Godzilla became a mom who wanted to go lay eggs in New York City, and when the military guys fired guns at him, Godzilla would, and I can't even believe it as I type it, Godzilla would actually squeal, turn, run, and hide. Squeal, run away, and hide. In the Godzilla movie. Basic approach, wrong. The older movies and the character had been staples of childhoods for so many. Monsters that should have terrified them instead grabbed their imaginations. Monsters are magical, fantastical things. So when you try to bring them into the real world and have them try to make sense in real world terms, things can get lost in translation.
時代とともにもうどんどんそういうそのテクニックが技術がこう進歩してきてるでしょ。コンピューターグラフィックスなんか使ってね。だ非常にそういう意味ではもうなんていうのかな、もうリアルすぎるぐらいリアルすぎてね。
Dean Devlin has recently admitted that it was a mistake on his part to force Roland into doing the movie. He knew that Roland didn't have a passion for Godzilla at all and was fueled mainly by his own childhood love for the character to make the film. Patrick Tatopoulos was quoted with saying that, "I knew I was not going to be able to please everyone in the world with my Godzilla design, but I hoped that even the hardcore fans wouldn't be too disappointed." Back in the beginning when Toho Studios, the fathers of Godzilla, approved of my designs, that was the biggest moment for me. The Godzilla that is on the screen now is exactly the one I was thinking of when I created the original concept. So does this movie have a legacy? Well, there's that pretty kick-ass cartoon that came out of it, and it gave lonely people something to watch at 1 a.m. on the AMC channel for a couple of years. If you haven't seen it, or maybe have judged it by its cover, I'd say give it a try. There does, however, exist nostalgia towards this film from those who grew up on it. Those fans have accepted its place in the mythos, whether they enjoy it or despise its every frame. I might only be Godzilla in name only, but there's a whole generation of fans whose first exposure to the monster was me and this movie. The entire history of film is filled with mistakes, but mistakes are good. You know, we learn from them and move forward. We learn to tell better stories, not you, and grow better characters that will connect with current audiences while still remaining timeless. If you want a good Godzilla movie, maybe look elsewhere. But if you want a perfect example of a late 90s studio popcorn summer event blockbuster, then your search is over.